Hey up and welcome or welcome back, whichever the case may be. Now, before I start rambling today, I'd just like to give a shout out to two other content creators who've recently had spills, albeit without serious injury, thankfully, to themselves or extensive damage to their bikes. So, first off, Moto UK. Love your channel, Nick. And like many others, I cringed at your off that you had on that ice. Much respect to you for going out to create content in adverse weather conditions like that, and I hope all goes well subsequently and you get the Tiger sorted. Looked a bit expensive, that, my friend. And to the mindful motorcyclist Sean, we didn't see your tumble on camera, but I know you're okay, and that the damage to the Gold Star is relatively minor, and again I hope all goes well going forward. Right then, so there is a debate to be had amongst many a motorcyclist concerning the projection of a British motorcycle manufacturing identity onto foreign-made machines sporting names such as Gold Star and Interceptor, and indeed a sub-debate concerning the extent to which such efforts by the likes of BSA and Royal Enfield have succeeded in sowing in us nostalgic types the seeds of a notion of a connection with years gone by along the roads of these verdant lands we call Great Britain. There can be no question that those of us of a certain age have become to some degree captivated, even enchanted, by the relatively recent emergence of the modern classic genre. And to the extent that this very aim has been at the root of the marketing strategies of Mahindra and Eicher, the parent companies of BSA and Royal Enfield, we can safely assume that the whole movement has become a resounding success, doubtless the envy of many a manufacturing mogul. It is important to recognise, though, that the modern classic genre itself does not have its origins in the creative minds and design rooms of the likes of Triumph and Royal Enfield. In fact, as far back as the late 90s and early 2000s, the four big Japanese manufacturers offered up their own tribute acts to bikes made in the 60s and 70s. Retro-inspired muscle bikes badged XJR 1300, GSX 1400, CB 1300 and others enjoyed some popularity over 20 years ago, having, as they then did, a nod to a time some 3 decades before. But these bikes were for the most part inspired by the earlier Japanese machines which landed on these shores in the 60s and the 70s and put the noses of the likes of Triumph and Norton firmly out of joint. For the true emergence of the British-inspired modern classic, we must look to 2002 and the launch of the Triumph Bonneville T100, resurrecting a name and a style last seen many years before. So began production of a highly successful range of retro motorcycles under the Bonneville name, which fast became a platform for cruiser, bobber and scrambler variants, all of which are arguably at the forefront of Triumph's marketing credo today. In short, Triumph pretty much had the British modern classic sector to itself for some 15 years between 2002 and 2017, when their period of dominance was suddenly intercepted by the entrepreneurial savoir-faire of a certain manufacturer in a certain former British colony. By the time Royal Enfield had a foothold in the UK market, Triumph had lost a large slice of its trump card in the notions of Britishness stakes, given that much of its manufacturing had by then been offshored to Thailand. This must surely be seen as a significant factor in the meteoric success of Royal Enfield's Interceptor 650. As those minded to come quick to the defence of Triumph on the basis of being British made suddenly found their erstwhile bragging rights taken from under them by Triumph themselves. Add to the mix a price point hugely undercutting Triumph's T100, then the subsequent truly expansive appeal of the Interceptor and Continental GT to modern classic fans the world over becomes rather obvious. And of course there is no disrespect to be had for the likes of BSA, AJS, Herald and other wannabes to know that the current modern classic race is largely one of two horses, Triumph and Royal Enfield. The recently resuscitated corpse of the Norton brand sits to my mind in a somewhat different place, and has an appeal limited to those lucky enough to have deep pockets, and likely a garage housing a number of other bikes, to which a shiny new Norton would become more of an artistic embellishment than a usable asset, much like a Savile Row suit in a wardrobe full of M&S office wear. So what this brief history of the modern classic movement tells us is that notions of Britishness are very much a moving feast, often intangible, verging on illusory. Much of those notions depend upon the sensibilities of individuals, variations in artistic taste, our respective places in the timeline of history, memories shared or held close, or perhaps nothing more than an emotional response to that which presents itself in front of us, a response which needs neither to be qualified nor quantified. Put simply, and to quote Little Britain, I want that one. I don't know about you, but it's upon this last process, that of emotional response, which I rely when looking to acquire a new motorcycle. Pragmatic considerations around performance, economy, value for money, practicality, comfort, they're usually relegated to the second division, as that undefinable, almost irrational urge to own becomes a Premiership team player and strikes home the final and irreversible decision to buy. I went to Motorcycle Live at the NEC in Birmingham again a couple of weeks ago now, and I was largely, well, underwhelmed. I had it firmly in mind that a new bike might be on the horizon for the spring, and that after perusing all that was on offer at the NEC, I would surely encounter at least one or two machines which might spark that emotional response, and put to bed for good all the earlier, more practical considerations which had been plaguing my decision-making processes. I didn't want to walk into those cathedral-like halls of metal, plastics and rubber with a modern classic head-on, or an adventure bike head-on, or a touring bike head-on, or a sports bike head-on, or any sort of head-on. I'd simply resolved to allow a positive emotional response to win the day, and to hell with rationality. You see, the thing is, if you're like me, God forbid, for the most part the appeal of all these bikes is rooted in perceptions arising from the glossy online images to be found on Auto Trader, eBay, the web pages of brand and independent dealerships, and the YouTube reviews. I don't know if something subliminal is operating here, but those retained perceptions often get dashed on the shores of reality when you come across the bike in the flesh. Of those few bikes at the NEC which did spark in me some emotional response, I can say only this: not one of them made any sense. Perhaps therein lies the answer. So what has all this got to do with notions of Britishness when it comes to motorcycles? Well, to my mind, such notions owe more to that initial emotional response than they do to individual practical considerations concerning country of manufacture, country of ownership, proportion of foreign-made components, heritage and legacy. And whereas those factors may in some subconscious way influence the emotional response, let's face it, the bulk of it comes from what first we see and what then we feel. Perhaps sitting upon a bike which has sparked that initial response will either confirm it or question it. Similarly, a test ride, but as Derek of Bangers and Cash fame is fond of saying, you buy a car from 20 feet away. So too a bike. I know what he means. So if you are a modern classic motorcycle fan wrestling with notions of Britishness when contemplating your next bike, just trust to your senses. Trust to your instincts. Remember that, as with examinations, the first answer is usually the right one. If a bike, regardless of its provenance, ignites in you, whatever your heritage, some connection with the glory days of bygone British motorcycling, then it's as British as it needs to be. So once again, thank you for watching. Please like, subscribe and share. It really helps me and I appreciate it very much. And I will leave you with a quote from Nelson Mandela. May your choices reflect your hopes, not your fears. I'll see thee.